I always believed marriage was forever. That's what my parents taught me, what I saw in their 43 years together. When Dad looked at Mom across the breakfast table each morning, his eyes still held that same spark from their wedding photos. They never raised their voices, never slept in separate beds, never questioned their commitment. That was love, real love, and I wanted exactly that for myself. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Meeting Laura in college felt like destiny. She was everything I wasn't. Outgoing where I was reserved, spontaneous where I planned ahead, the life of every party while I preferred quiet conversations. She had this infectious laugh that could fill a room, and when she turned that brilliant smile on me, I felt like the luckiest guy on campus. "You're too serious, Jason," she'd tease, pulling me away from my engineering textbooks. "Life's supposed to be fun." And it was fun, with her. We balanced each other perfectly, or so I thought. After graduation, I landed a position with a respected construction firm, while Laura explored different career paths, never quite settling on one thing. It didn't matter. I was making good money, and we had our whole lives ahead of us. The wedding was everything Laura dreamed of, elegant, expensive, with 200 guests who danced until midnight. I would have been happy with something smaller, but seeing her joy made every penny worth it. She kept her maiden name, Patterson, which surprised my parents but didn't bother me much. Laura valued her independence, and I respected that. "Besides," she said with that playful grin, "Laura Patterson sounds better than Laura Mitchell, don't you think?" Our first years of marriage felt magical. We bought a house in a good neighborhood, the kind with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. Laura decorated it with an eye for style that I completely lacked, turning our space into something that belonged in a magazine. When Beth arrived 2 years later, followed by Janie 18 months after that, our family felt complete. I threw myself into work, determined to provide the security my girls deserved. Long hours at construction sites, managing crews, ensuring projects stayed on schedule and under budget. The physical demands never bothered me. I'd always been strong, built for this kind of work. What mattered was coming home to Laura's cooking and my daughter's laughter echoing through the house. Laura seemed to thrive as a mother, at least initially. She joined playgroups, organized neighborhood gatherings, and maintained an active social calendar that sometimes left me feeling like an outsider looking in. While I was content with quiet family evenings, Laura craved constant stimulation, always planning the next outing or event. "You should come with us tonight," she'd say, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror. "The girls are having dinner at that new Italian place." "I've got early meetings tomorrow," I'd reply, which was usually true. "You go ahead and have fun." She always did. Laura had a gift for making friends quickly, drawing people into her orbit with her charm and energy. I admired that about her, even if I couldn't quite understand it. My idea of relaxation was a cold drink on our back porch, watching the girls play in the yard while Laura chatted on the phone with her latest friend. The first real crack in my perfect marriage appeared at my family reunion 3 years ago. We were gathered in my uncle's backyard, the usual crowd of relatives sharing stories and catching up. Laura was holding court near the picnic table, entertaining my cousins with some story about her book club drama. "Oh, Jason's so predictable," she said with a laugh that carried across the yard. "Same routine every day, same conversations every night. Sometimes I think about just packing up and starting over somewhere exciting." The laughter that followed felt like ice in my chest. I kept loading potato salad onto my plate, pretending I hadn't heard, but the words echoed in my mind for weeks afterward. When I mentioned it later that night, Laura brushed it off. "I was just joking around, Jason. You know how I am at parties. I say silly things to get laughs." But something in her eyes didn't match her casual tone. Something distant and calculating that I'd never noticed before. I told myself I was being paranoid, that marriage naturally had its ups and downs. My parents had probably gone through similar phases. Still, I started paying closer attention. Laura's phone habits changed. She'd take calls in other rooms, her screen always face down when she set it aside. Her friend gatherings became more frequent, sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week. When I asked about including me occasionally, she'd get defensive. "You always say you're too tired from work," she'd snap. "Besides, you don't really enjoy that kind of thing anyway." She wasn't wrong about that, but the dismissal stung. We were supposed to be partners, weren't we? Shouldn't she want to spend time with me? Even if it meant compromising occasionally. The girls started asking why Mommy went out so much. Beth, now 7 and perceptive beyond her years, would curl up next to me on the couch after Laura left for another evening out. "Doesn't Mommy like staying home with us?" she asked one Thursday night. "Of course she does, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "Mommy just likes spending time with her friends, too." "But you don't go out with friends very much." "Some people need more social time than others," I explained, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "That's just how Mommy is." Beth nodded solemnly, but I could see the confusion in her young eyes. Children have an instinct for detecting imbalance, and our family's balance was definitely shifting. Laura's mood swings became more pronounced around this time. She'd return from her outings glowing and energetic, full of stories about her friends' adventures and plans for future gatherings. But in the quiet moments at home, especially when it was just the 4 of us, she seemed restless and irritated by the smallest things. "Can you please not leave your work boots by the front door?" she'd say with an edge in her voice. "It looks terrible when people come over." "I've always put them there," I'd reply, genuinely confused. "It's never bothered you before." "Well, it bothers me now." These small conflicts accumulated like sediment in a river, slowly changing the landscape of our relationship. I found myself walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate what might set her off next. The easy comfort we'd once shared gave way to careful politeness, as if we were roommates rather than husband and wife. My work became both refuge and burden. During the day, surrounded by the straightforward challenges of construction management, I could focus on concrete problems with clear solutions. But evenings at home felt increasingly tense, filled with unspoken frustrations and growing distance. "You're distracted lately," my foreman Mike observed one afternoon. "Everything okay at home?" "Just the usual family stuff," I said, not wanting to admit that I wasn't sure what was normal anymore. Mike nodded knowingly. He'd been through a rough patch in his own marriage a few years back. "Sometimes relationships go through seasons, you know? The important thing is keeping communication open." I appreciated his concern, but communication was exactly what Laura and I seemed to be losing. Our conversations had become superficial, focused on logistics and schedules rather than thoughts and feelings. When I tried to dig deeper, to understand what was driving her restlessness, she'd deflect with jokes or change the subject entirely. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in early spring. Laura was getting ready for another outing, this time a shopping trip with her friend Michelle that would apparently take most of the day. I was making breakfast for the girls when she came downstairs, dressed to impress in a way that seemed excessive for shopping. "You look nice," I said carefully. "Thanks." She was checking her phone, typing rapidly. "I might be late tonight. Michelle wants to try that new restaurant downtown after shopping." "Again?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. Laura's head snapped up, her expression immediately defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just, you've been out a lot lately. I thought maybe we could do something together as a family today." "We do family things all the time," she said, but we both knew that wasn't true. "Besides, I already made plans." "When was the last time we went somewhere together, just the 4 of us?" "I don't know, Jason. I don't keep a calendar of family activities." Her tone was sharp now, the way it got when she felt cornered. "Why are you making such a big deal about this?" Beth and Janie had stopped eating, sensing the tension between their parents. I forced myself to speak calmly, not wanting to upset them further. I'm not making a big deal. I just miss spending time with my wife. Something flickered across Laura's face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being called out. She grabbed her purse and keys with sharp, efficient movements. "We'll talk about this later," she said, kissing the girls goodbye without meeting my eyes. "I really do have to go." The door closed behind her with more force than necessary, leaving me alone with my daughters and a growing certainty that something fundamental had changed in our marriage. I just didn't know how deep the cracks ran yet. The weeks following that Saturday morning argument felt like living in a house with faulty wiring. Everything looked normal on the surface, but dangerous currents ran beneath. Laura continued her frequent outings, and I continued pretending they didn't bother me. We maintained the facade of a functional family, but the strain was becoming harder to hide. I started noticing things I'd previously overlooked. The way Laura's eyes lit up when her phone buzzed with certain messages. How she'd developed new interests in music and restaurants that didn't align with anything we'd ever shared. The subtle changes in her appearance, new clothes, a different perfume, a haircut that seemed designed to impress someone other than her family. "Daddy, why don't you and Mommy laugh together anymore?" Janie asked one evening while I was helping her with homework. The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You used to laugh at the same things on TV, but now you watch different shows, and Mommy doesn't sit next to you anymore." Out of the mouths of babes, my 5-year-old daughter had identified something I'd been trying to ignore. Laura and I had become strangers, sharing the same address, going through the motions of marriage while our actual connection withered. That night, after the girls were asleep, I tried to bridge the gap. "Laura, can we talk?" She was on her laptop, supposedly managing our household finances, but clearly engaged with something more interesting based on her expression. "About what?" she asked without looking up. "About us. About our family." Janie noticed that we don't seem as close as we used to be. "Janie's 5 years old, Jason. I don't think we should base our relationship on the observations of a kindergartner." The dismissive tone stung, but I pressed on. Maybe she's seeing something we're missing. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When did we last go out together, just the two of us? Laura finally closed the laptop, but her body language remained defensive. "We talk all the time. About schedules and bills and who's picking up the girls. That's not the same thing." "What do you want me to say, Jason? That marriage isn't as exciting as it was when we were 22? That having kids and responsibilities changes things? Welcome to adulthood." Her words carried a bitter edge that made me feel foolish for even trying. But I couldn't let it go, not when our daughters were already sensing the distance between us. "I'm not asking for excitement. I'm asking for connection, for partnership. We used to be a team." "We are a team," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Just because I have interests outside this house doesn't mean I'm not committed to our family. It's not about having interests. It's about how you prioritize them. The girls barely see you during the week, and weekends you're always making plans that don't include us." Laura's expression hardened. "So now I'm a terrible mother? Is that what you're saying?" "I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying I miss my wife, and our daughters miss their mother. I'm right here, Jason. I've always been right here." But she wasn't, not really. The woman sitting across from me looked like Laura, sounded like Laura, but something essential was missing. The warmth, the genuine affection, the sense that we were building something together. All of it had been replaced by obligation and resentment. Our conversation ended without resolution, as most of them did lately. Laura retreated to her laptop, and I went to check on the girls, finding solace in their peaceful faces and steady breathing. Whatever was happening between Laura and me, I was determined to protect them from the worst of it. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening that started like any other. Laura had gone to dinner with Michelle again, or so she said. The girls were in bed, and I was reviewing project plans for a commercial building we were starting the following week. Around 10:30, I realized I'd left my phone charger in the truck. Laura's car wasn't in the driveway yet, which wasn't unusual given her recent schedule. But as I walked out to get the charger, I saw her Honda parked 3 houses down, engine off, interior light on. My first thought was that she'd had car trouble and was calling for help. I started walking toward her, ready to offer assistance, when I saw movement in the passenger seat. Laura wasn't alone. I stopped walking, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Laura was leaning across the center console, and there was definitely someone else in the car with her. Someone male, based on the silhouette. They were close together, closer than any casual conversation would require. Every instinct told me to march over there and demand an explanation, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way they were positioned, the obvious intimacy of their posture, or maybe it was the sick certainty that confronting them would only confirm what I already knew in my gut. Instead, I retreated to the house, my hands shaking as I plugged in my phone. Laura came in 20 minutes later, humming softly and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "How was dinner?" I asked from the kitchen, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Good. Michelle's going through a rough patch with her husband, so we talked longer than planned." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that I wondered how many others there had been. How long had this been going on? How many dinners with Michelle had actually been something else entirely? "That's too bad about Michelle," I said. "Anything we can do to help?" "Oh, you know how marriage problems are," Laura replied, still focused on her reflection. "Sometimes people just grow apart." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me, but I kept my expression neutral. "I suppose that happens." She kissed my cheek before heading upstairs, a gesture that felt more like performance than affection. I stayed in the kitchen for another hour, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to do with my newfound knowledge. The rational part of my brain insisted I needed more evidence before making accusations. Maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. Maybe there was an innocent explanation, but my gut knew better. The distance, the defensiveness, the constant outings, it all made sense now. Over the next week, I found myself paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. Laura's phone habits became even more secretive. She started taking showers immediately after coming home from her outings. She developed a sudden interest in our finances, asking pointed questions about my salary and our savings account. The final piece of evidence came accidentally. Laura had left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower, and a text message popped up on the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview was right there, impossible to ignore. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place. S." My hands were trembling as I set the phone back down exactly where she'd left it. S. Someone whose name started with S was sending my wife messages about meeting up. Someone who wasn't Michelle, whose name started with M. That evening, Laura announced another dinner plan with Michelle. I nodded and smiled, kissed her goodbye, and waited exactly 15 minutes before getting in my truck. I knew it was wrong, knew that following her made me the kind of husband I'd never wanted to be, but I had to know the truth. She wasn't at any restaurant. Her car was parked behind a small apartment complex, about 10 minutes from our house, and this time I didn't hesitate. I parked where I could see her vehicle and waited. At 9:47 p.m., Laura emerged from one of the ground floor units. She wasn't alone. The man with her was tall, athletic, probably a few years younger than both of us. They stood close together on the small porch, his hand on her waist, her fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. I watched my wife of 9 years kiss another man with a passion I hadn't seen from her in months. Watched her laugh at something he whispered in her ear. Watched her glance around nervously before getting in her car and driving away, probably heading home to lie to me again. The drive home passed in a blur of rage, heartbreak, and terrible clarity. Everything made sense now. The distance, the defensiveness, the constant criticism of our life together. Laura hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She'd found someone else to fall in love with. She was already home when I arrived, sitting on the couch with her laptop, looking for all the world like a devoted wife catching up on household tasks. "How was your evening?" she asked without looking up. "Quiet," I said. "How was dinner with Michelle?" "Good. We went to that new place downtown. You'd hate it. Too trendy." Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence as all the others. I stood there looking at this woman I'd promised to love and honor, wondering when she'd become such a stranger. "Laura," I said quietly. Something in my tone made her look up from the laptop. "What?" "We need to talk." The moment I said those 4 words, the atmosphere in our living room changed completely. Laura's expression shifted from casual disinterest to wary attention, like an animal sensing danger. "About what?" she asked, closing the laptop with deliberate care. I sat down across from her, my heart hammering against my ribs. 9 years of marriage, 2 beautiful daughters, a life we'd built together, and it was about to end with this conversation. "About where you really were tonight." Laura's face went very still. "I told you, I was with Michelle." "No, you weren't." My voice was steady, which surprised me. "You were at an apartment complex on Maple Street with a man whose name starts with S." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you think you saw, but I saw you kiss him, Laura. I saw you in his arms on that porch. I saw my wife with another man." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from an explosion. Laura stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her mind racing, calculating, deciding how to respond. "How long have you been following me?" she asked finally. Not denial, not explanation, just anger at being caught. "Tonight was the first time," I said, "but I've suspected for weeks. The phone calls, the constant outings, the way you've been treating me and the girls, it all makes sense now." Laura stood up and began pacing, her movements sharp and agitated. "You had no right to spy on me." "I had every right. I'm your husband." "That doesn't give you the right to stalk me." The audacity of her response left me momentarily speechless. She was turning this around, making me the villain for discovering her betrayal. "Who is he?" I asked. "That's not important." "It's important to me. Who is he, Laura?" She stopped pacing and faced me, her chin raised defiantly. "His name is Scott. He's a personal trainer at the gym." The gym she'd joined 6 months ago, claiming she needed to get back in shape after having the girls. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "How long?" "How long what?" "Don't play games with me. How long have you been having an affair?" The word affair seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She flinched, then sat down heavily on the edge of the couch. 4 months, she said quietly. 4 months. A third of a year. While I'd been working extra hours to provide for our family, while I'd been helping our daughters with homework and bedtime stories, while I'd been worrying about the growing distance between us, Laura had been building a relationship with another man. "Do you love him?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Yes." That single word shattered what remained of my heart. I'd been prepared for lust, for a midlife crisis, for temporary insanity. But love? Love meant this wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. Love meant she'd chosen him over us. "What about our daughters?" I asked. "What about them? Do they factor into your decision-making at all? Or are you so wrapped up in your new romance that you've forgotten you're a mother?" "Don't you dare question my commitment to my children," Laura snapped, the tears evaporating instantly. "I would never do anything to hurt them." "You're destroying their family. How is that not hurting them?" Families can take different forms, Jason. Just because we're not happy together doesn't mean we can't both be good parents. The casual way she discussed dismantling our children's world made me feel physically ill. This wasn't the woman I'd married, the woman who'd cried with joy when each of our daughters was born. "So what now?" I asked. "Do you want a divorce?" Laura was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was carefully measured. "I don't know. I need time to think." "Time to think about what? You just told me you love another man." "It's complicated, Jason. Scott and we have something special, but that doesn't mean I want to blow up everything we've built here." I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you suggesting we stay married while you continue seeing him?" "People work out arrangements," she said defensively. "Modern marriages don't have to follow traditional rules." "Modern marriages." I repeated the phrase like it was something distasteful. "Is that what you call cheating on your husband and lying to your children?" "I haven't lied to the children about anything. Every time you tell them you're going out with Michelle when you're really meeting Scott, that's a lie. Every time you come home and pretend to be their devoted mother while you're actually planning your next rendezvous, that's a lie." Laura's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped, to feel like your life is just the same routine over and over, with no excitement, no passion, no possibility for growth. So our life together is a trap? Our daughters are a burden?" "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you said. You're trapped by your family, so you found an escape route." "Scott makes me feel alive again," she said, her voice taking on a dreamy quality that made me want to throw something. "He sees me as a woman, not just a wife and mother. He appreciates my independence, my intelligence, my ambitions." "What ambitions? You haven't worked a steady job since Beth was born." "See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You reduce me to my role in this household instead of seeing me as a complete person." I was beginning to understand that this conversation would never reach a satisfying conclusion. Laura had already rewritten our entire history to justify her choices. In her version, I was the controlling husband who'd stifled her dreams, and Scott was the liberating force who'd shown her what she was missing. "I need you to stop seeing him," I said. "I can't do that." "You can. You choose not to. I won't give up the first real happiness I've felt in years." "What about my happiness? What about our daughter's happiness?" "Your happiness isn't my responsibility, Jason, and the girls will adjust. Children are resilient." The coldness in her voice chilled me. This wasn't the woman who'd once stayed up all night when Beth had pneumonia, who'd cried at every school play and soccer game. Somewhere along the way, Laura had become someone I didn't recognize. "If you won't end it with Scott, then we need to discuss separation," I said. "Fine. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. This is my house too, and those are my daughters too." "Our daughters," I corrected. "Our daughters," she agreed. "And they need stability. I think we should continue living here together while we figure out the details." The idea of sharing a house with Laura while she continued her affair seemed like torture, but she was right about the girls needing stability. Any major changes to their living situation would require careful planning. "Separate bedrooms," I said. "Of course. And I want honesty about where you're going and when you'll be back. No more lies about Michelle." Laura nodded, though I could see the reluctance in her expression. "And Laura, if you bring him to this house, if you expose our daughters to your affair partner, I will make sure you lose custody. Do you understand me?" "You can't threaten me, Jason." "It's not a threat, it's a promise. This house is their safe space, and I won't let you contaminate it." We stared at each other across the coffee table, two people who'd once promised to love and cherish each other, now negotiating the terms of our mutual destruction. "I'm going to bed," Laura said finally. "In the guest room." "Good." She gathered her things and headed for the stairs, then paused. Jason, I never meant for it to happen this way. But you're not sorry it did. She considered this for a moment, then shook her head. No, I'm not sorry. After she left, I sat alone in the living room until nearly 3 in the morning, trying to process the complete collapse of my marriage. Tomorrow I would have to wake up and pretend everything was normal for Beth and Janie's sake. I would have to go to work and manage construction crews while my personal life crumbled. I would have to figure out how to be a single father while still technically married to a woman who loved someone else. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for the family I'd thought we were, for the future I'd planned, for the man I'd been before I learned that love wasn't always enough to hold a marriage together. The next morning arrived with cruel normalcy. Beth and Janie chattered over breakfast about school projects and weekend plans, blissfully unaware that their parents' marriage had imploded the night before. Laura moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, making lunches and checking backpacks as if nothing had changed. Daddy, you look tired, Beth observed, studying my face with the intense scrutiny only children possess. Just didn't sleep well, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. Sometimes grown-ups have trouble with that. Laura glanced at me across the kitchen but said nothing. We'd entered some strange new territory where we had to maintain the illusion of a functional family while privately navigating the wreckage of our relationship. After dropping the girls at school, I drove to the construction site in a fog of exhaustion and disbelief. The commercial building project demanded my full attention, coordinating subcontractors, reviewing blueprints, solving the inevitable problems that arose when theory met reality. Normally, I thrived on these challenges, but today, everything felt distant and surreal. You okay, boss? Mike asked around noon, finding me staring at the same set of plans I'd been holding for 20 minutes. Family stuff, I said, which was becoming my standard response to concerned inquiries. Mike nodded sympathetically. Take care of yourself, man. Projects come and go, but family's forever. If only he knew how wrong he was. That evening, Laura announced she was going out again. No pretense about Michelle this time, just a simple statement that she'd be back late and not to wait up. I helped the girls with homework while she got ready, listening to her move around upstairs with a mixture of anger and resignation. Where's Mommy going? Janie asked as Laura's car pulled out of the driveway. To see a friend, I said, which was technically true, though it barely scratched the surface of the situation. She sees friends a lot, Beth observed with the same perceptive tone that had worried me before. Some people are more social than others, I replied, falling back on my previous explanation even though it felt increasingly inadequate. The girls accepted this without further questions, but I could see them processing the information, filing it away with all the other small changes they'd noticed in our family dynamic. Children are remarkably adaptable, but they're also incredibly observant. How long before they started asking harder questions? Over the following weeks, Laura and I settled into an uncomfortable routine. We shared the house like polite roommates, coordinating schedules and household responsibilities with business-like efficiency. She continued seeing Scott several times a week, no longer bothering to hide her destinations. I focused on work and the girls, trying to create pockets of normalcy in an increasingly abnormal situation. The hardest part was watching Laura transform before my eyes. The guilt and defensiveness from our initial confrontation gave way to something approaching contentment. She hummed while doing laundry, smiled at private messages on her phone, and generally seemed happier than she'd been in months. Her affair wasn't causing her anguish. It was fulfilling her. Meanwhile, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. The man who'd believed in forever marriage, who'd built his identity around being a devoted husband and father, was being erased piece by piece. I went through the motions of my daily life, but everything felt hollow and temporary. 3 weeks into our new arrangement, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called my old college friend Danny, who lived about an hour away, and asked if he wanted to grab dinner and catch up. "Jason, man, it's been forever," Danny said when I called. "What's the occasion?" "Just felt like reconnecting," I said. "You free Saturday night?" We met at a sports bar halfway between our towns, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Danny was going through his own relationship challenges. His longtime girlfriend had moved out the previous month, and there was something comforting about talking to someone else whose life wasn't following the expected script. "Marriage is weird, man," Danny said over his second beer. "You think you know someone, and then they just change. Or maybe they don't change. Maybe you just finally see who they really were all along." I found myself telling him about Laura's affair, about our current living situation, about my complete bewilderment at how quickly everything had fallen apart. Danny listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "So what's your plan?" he asked finally. "I don't have one," I admitted. "I keep thinking she'll come to her senses, realize what she's throwing away, but every day she seems more convinced that this Scott guy is her path to happiness." "And what about your happiness?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on trying to save my marriage, on protecting the girls from upheaval, that I hadn't considered what I actually wanted for my own future. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've been Jason the husband and Jason the father for so long, I'm not sure who I am without those roles." "Maybe it's time to find out." Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Possibility. Not hope for my marriage, that ship had probably sailed, but possibility for whatever came next. I was 32 years old, financially stable, and devoted to my daughters. That had to count for something. Laura was already home when I arrived, reading in the living room with a glass of wine. "How was your evening?" she asked, which was more attention than she'd paid to my activities in weeks. "Good. Had dinner with Danny Peterson. Remember him from college? The one who played guitar?" "That's him. He's going through a breakup." Laura nodded absently, already returning to her book. But something about her posture suggested she was listening more carefully than she appeared to be. "Laura," I said, settling into the chair across from her, "we need to talk about next steps." She looked up, her expression guarded. "What kind of next steps?" "We can't live like this indefinitely. The girls are starting to notice the tension, and honestly, it's not fair to any of us." "What are you suggesting?" "I think we should see a lawyer, start discussing divorce terms." The word divorce hung in the air between us like a challenge. Laura set down her book and studied my face. "Are you sure that's what you want?" she asked. "I want my wife back," I said. "But that woman doesn't exist anymore. You've made it clear that you're happier with Scott than you ever were with me. So let's stop pretending and make it official." "What about the girls?" "We'll figure out custody arrangements that work for everyone. Plenty of divorced parents manage to raise healthy, happy children." Laura was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing options, calculating outcomes. "I'd want joint custody," she said finally. "That's reasonable. And I'd want to stay in the house until we can figure out a fair division of assets." "Also reasonable. And Jason?" "I don't want this to get ugly. Whatever happens between us, we need to put the girls first." I almost laughed at that statement. She'd been putting her own desires ahead of our family for months, but now she wanted to claim the moral high ground. "I agree," I said instead. "The girls' well-being is the most important thing." We talked for another hour, discussing practical matters with the same careful politeness we'd use with strangers. By the time we went to our separate bedrooms, we'd established the basic framework for ending our marriage. As I lay in bed that night, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The uncertainty was over. We were getting divorced. Laura would be free to pursue her new relationship, and I would be free to rebuild my life on my own terms. For the first time since discovering the affair, I fell asleep easily. The divorce proceedings moved with surprising efficiency once we both committed to the process. Laura and I hired separate lawyers, but maintained our agreement to keep things civil for the girls' sake. Our attorneys worked out the details while we continued our strange cohabitation, sharing the house like business partners dissolving a company. I threw myself into work with renewed energy, taking on additional projects and responsibilities that kept my mind occupied during the day. The physical demands of construction management felt therapeutic. There was something satisfying about solving concrete problems, about seeing tangible progress on buildings that would stand for decades. "You seem different lately," Mike observed one afternoon as we reviewed the progress on our commercial project. "More focused, I guess." "Going through some changes at home," I said. "Sometimes change is good, even when it doesn't feel that way initially." Mike nodded knowingly. He'd been through his own divorce several years earlier and had emerged stronger on the other side. His example gave me hope that I could do the same. The girls were handling the situation better than I'd expected, though they were clearly aware that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. Beth, always the more perceptive of the two, had stopped asking why Mommy went out so much and instead focused on the time we did spend together as a family. "Daddy, can we go camping this weekend?" she asked one Thursday evening while we were working on her math homework. Camping? The idea hadn't occurred to me, but it sounded appealing. "Where would you want to go?" "That place Uncle Mike told us about, with the lake and the hiking trails." Mike had mentioned a campground about 2 hours north that was perfect for families. I'd always meant to take the girls there, but had never found the time. "Let me check with Mommy about her plans," I said. But when I approached Laura about the camping trip, her response surprised me. "You should take them," she said. "I have other commitments this weekend." Other commitments. Code for time with Scott, I assumed. Part of me felt angry that she was choosing her boyfriend over a family weekend, but another part felt relieved. The girls and I could have an adventure without the underlying tension that accompanied all our family activities lately. That Saturday morning, I loaded my truck with camping gear I hadn't used in years, along with enough supplies for a small expedition. Beth and Janie were practically vibrating with excitement as we drove north, chattering about s'mores and ghost stories and whether we might see bears. "This is going to be the best weekend ever," Janie declared from her booster seat. Looking at their happy faces in the rearview mirror, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: pure, uncomplicated joy. No walking on eggshells, no managing Laura's moods, no pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Just me and my daughters, heading into the woods for an adventure. The campground exceeded our expectations. Our site was nestled among tall pines with a view of the lake, and the girls immediately began exploring while I set up our tent. They collected interesting rocks, identified birds with the help of a nature guide I'd brought, and helped me gather firewood for the evening. That night, as we roasted marshmallows around our campfire, Beth asked the question I'd been dreading. "Daddy, are you and Mommy getting divorced?" Janie stopped blowing on her marshmallow and looked at me with wide, serious eyes. I'd prepared for this conversation, but actually having it felt much harder than I'd anticipated. "Yes, sweetheart," I said gently. "We are." "Is it because Mommy has a boyfriend?" Beth asked with the directness that only children possess. My heart nearly stopped. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard her talking on the phone about someone named Scott. She sounded different when she talked about him." I closed my eyes briefly, trying to find the right words. Laura and I had agreed to tell the girls together when the time was right, but apparently that decision had been made for us. "Sometimes grown-ups realize they're not happy together anymore," I said carefully. "It doesn't mean we don't love you both very, very much." "Will we still live in our house?" Janie asked, her voice small. "You'll always have a home with me," I promised. "We might have to make some changes, but you'll always be safe and loved." What about Mommy? Mommy will always be your mother, and she loves you too. We're going to work out a plan so you can spend time with both of us. The girls processed this information with the remarkable adaptability of children. They asked a few more practical questions. Would they have to change schools? Could they bring their toys when they visited Mommy? Would we still have family movie nights? And I answered as honestly as I could. I'm sorry this is happening, I said finally. I know it's confusing and scary. It's okay, Daddy, Beth said, leaning against my shoulder. You seem happier lately. Her observation startled me. I'd been so focused on protecting them from the upheaval that I hadn't realized they'd noticed my improved mood since deciding to move forward with the divorce. I am happier, I admitted. Sometimes when people aren't good together as husband and wife, they can be better as separate people. We spent the rest of the evening telling stories and looking at stars, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning brought a surprise that would change the trajectory of our weekend. While the girls were fishing off the dock, I struck up a conversation with a woman at the neighboring campsite who was struggling to start her camp stove. Need some help with that? I offered. Please, she said with a grateful smile. I'm usually better with mechanical things, but this one has me stumped. Her name was Diana, and she was camping with her 8-year-old daughter Matilda, while her ex-husband had their son for the weekend. She was a nurse at the regional hospital, recently divorced, and refreshingly honest about the challenges of single parenthood. Some weekends are harder than others, she admitted, as I adjusted the stove's connection. But Matilda and I have gotten pretty good at our girls' adventures. There was something immediately comfortable about Diana. She had an easy laugh and a practical approach to life that I found appealing after months of Laura's emotional volatility. When Matilda and my girls discovered they all loved the same book series, it felt natural to suggest they play together while Diana and I continued talking. We spent most of Sunday in each other's company, sharing meals and supervising the children's activities. Diana was intelligent and funny, with none of the restlessness that had driven Laura to seek excitement elsewhere. She seemed genuinely content with simple pleasures, good conversation, beautiful scenery, watching her daughter make new friends. This has been really nice, she said, as we prepared to leave Sunday afternoon. Matilda doesn't get to interact with other kids much outside of school. Same here, I said. The girls had a great time. We exchanged phone numbers, ostensibly so the kids could stay in touch, but I found myself hoping for more contact than that would require. Driving home, Beth surprised me again with her perceptiveness. I like Diana, she announced. She's nice to you. She seems like a good person, I agreed carefully. Mommy isn't always nice to you anymore, Janie added with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. Relationships are complicated, girls, but you're right that Diana seems like a kind person. Can we see her again? Maybe, I said. We'll see how things go. That evening, Laura was waiting when we returned, and for the first time in weeks, she seemed genuinely interested in our activities. How was camping? She asked, helping carry gear into the house. It was awesome, Beth exclaimed. We saw a family of deer, and Daddy taught us how to skip stones, and we met this really nice lady named Diana and her daughter. I watched Laura's expression carefully as Beth recounted our weekend adventures. When she mentioned Diana, something flickered across Laura's face, surprise, maybe, or concern. That sounds like fun, Laura said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Later, after the girls were in bed, Laura approached me in the kitchen. So, you met someone this weekend? She asked, trying to sound casual. We met several people, I replied. It's a friendly campground. The girls seemed particularly taken with this Diana person. She's a nice woman. Her daughter is about Beth's age. Are you planning to see her again? I looked at Laura carefully, trying to understand why she was asking. She'd been clear that she was in love with Scott, that she wanted to end our marriage, that she was happier with her new relationship than she'd ever been with me. Why would it matter if I'd met someone? I might, I said honestly. Why? I just want to make sure you're thinking about how this affects the girls. They're going through a lot of changes right now. The irony of her concern was almost laughable. Laura had been conducting an affair for months, had chosen her boyfriend over family time, and was lecturing me about considering the girls' feelings. I always think about the girls first, I said. That's never changed. Laura nodded, but I could see she wasn't entirely satisfied with my response. She'd grown comfortable with being the one who was moving on, who had found new love, who was building a different future. The possibility that I might do the same seemed to unsettle her. That night, as I lay in bed thinking about the weekend, I realized something important had shifted. For months, I'd been focused on what I was losing: my marriage, my nuclear family, my vision of the future. But this weekend had shown me what I might be gaining: freedom to be myself, closer relationships with my daughters, and maybe, eventually, a chance at love with someone who actually wanted to be with me. The divorce couldn't be finalized soon enough. The final divorce hearing took place on a gray Tuesday morning in November, exactly 6 months after I'd discovered Laura's affair. We sat at separate tables with our lawyers, looking like strangers who'd accidentally ended up in the same courtroom. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement with practiced efficiency, asking a few clarifying questions before declaring our marriage officially dissolved. "Good luck to both of you," the judge said as we gathered our papers. It was a kind gesture, though I suspected Laura and I had very different definitions of what good luck might look like. In the parking lot outside the courthouse, Laura and I had our final conversation as husband and wife. "I hope you'll be happy," she said, and I think she actually meant it. "I hope you will too," I replied, and I meant it as well. Whatever anger I'd felt toward her had gradually transformed into something closer to pity. She'd traded a stable family for the excitement of an affair, and while that choice had made sense to her at the time, I wondered if she'd eventually come to regret it. The custody arrangement we'd worked out was straightforward. The girls would live with me during the week and spend every other weekend with Laura, plus alternating holidays. Laura had found a small apartment across town, close enough for easy transitions, but far enough away that we wouldn't accidentally run into each other at the grocery store. "I want you to know that I'll always put Beth and Janie first," Laura said. "Whatever happened between us, they're the most important thing." "I know," I said, and I did know. Laura might have been a disappointing wife, but she genuinely loved our daughters, even if her way of showing it had become complicated. We shook hands, an oddly formal gesture after 9 years of marriage, and went to our separate cars. As I drove away from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. The uncertainty was finally over. I was officially a single father, free to build whatever kind of life I wanted. Diana and I had been talking regularly since our camping weekend, and our friendship had gradually deepened into something more meaningful. She understood the challenges of single parenthood, the guilt of putting your own happiness ahead of your children's comfort, the difficulty of starting over when you'd thought your life was already settled. "Are you ready for this?" she asked when I called to tell her the divorce was final. "I think so," I said. "It feels strange, but good strange. I remember that feeling, like you're finally free to be yourself again." That evening, I picked up Beth and Janie from their after-school program and took them out for pizza to celebrate what I privately thought of as our new beginning. They were adapting well to our modified family structure, though they still asked occasional questions about why Mommy lived in a different house now. "Is Mommy happier now?" Beth asked as we waited for our food. "I think she is," I said honestly. "Sometimes people need different things to be happy." "Are you happier, Daddy?" I considered the question carefully. Was I happier? The past 6 months had been emotionally exhausting, financially stressful, and logistically complicated. But underneath all of that, there was a sense of relief and possibility that I hadn't felt in years. "Yes," I said. "I think I am happier." "Good," Janie said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Happy is better than sad." 2 weeks later, Diana and I decided to take all 3 girls to a local festival. It felt like a significant step, our first public outing as whatever we were becoming. Matilda had integrated seamlessly into our group dynamic, and watching the 3 girls together felt natural in a way that surprised me. "They're good together," Diana observed as we watched them navigate a corn maze. "They are," I agreed. "It's funny how some things just work." "Speaking of things that work," Diana said, taking my hand as we walked, "I've been thinking about us." My heart rate picked up slightly. We'd been taking things slowly, both of us cautious about introducing new complications into our children's lives. "What about us?" "I think we're good together too. And I think the kids are ready for us to be more open about that." She was right. Beth and Janie had been asking when we'd see Diana again almost since our camping trip, and they clearly enjoyed spending time with her and Matilda. The foundation for a blended family was already there. "I'd like that," I said, squeezing her hand. That evening, as I tucked the girls into bed, Beth surprised me with another of her perceptive observations. "I think Diana makes you smile more," she said. "She does make me happy," I admitted. "Good. You deserve to be happy, Daddy." The simple sincerity of her statement nearly brought tears to my eyes. My 7-year-old daughter thought I deserved happiness. After months of feeling like a failure as a husband, that validation meant everything. Over the following months, Diana and I continued building our relationship while carefully managing the logistics of blending our families. The girls had their first sleepover at Diana's house in December, and by spring, we were spending most weekends together as a group. Laura's relationship with Scott had continued, though I gathered from the girls' occasional comments that it wasn't as blissful as she'd initially hoped. Living together had apparently revealed some incompatibilities that hadn't been obvious during their affair, and Laura seemed to be struggling with the reality of her choices. "Mommy seems sad sometimes," Janie mentioned one evening after returning from a weekend at Laura's apartment. "Grown-up relationships can be complicated," I said, which had become my standard response to questions about their mother's emotional state. I felt no satisfaction in Laura's apparent difficulties. If anything, I felt sorry for her. She'd blown up our family chasing a fantasy of passionate love, only to discover that fantasy couldn't sustain the mundane realities of daily life. In June, almost exactly a year after our camping trip, Diana and I decided to take the girls back to the same campground where we'd first met. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us, returning to the place where our new life had begun. "Look how much has changed," Diana said as we set up our tents in the same area where we'd camped the previous year. "Look how much has stayed the same," I countered, watching Beth teach Matilda how to skip stones while Janie collected interesting rocks along the shoreline. That night, around the campfire, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. A year ago, I'd been a man whose identity was completely tied up in a failing marriage, desperate to save something that was already beyond rescue. Now I was building something new with someone who actually wanted to be with me, someone who appreciated the quiet contentment I had to offer, instead of constantly seeking excitement elsewhere. "Daddy," Beth said, interrupting my thoughts, "are you and Diana going to get married?" The question hung in the air around our campfire. Diana and I exchanged glances, both of us aware that this was a conversation we'd been avoiding but probably needed to have. "That's a pretty big question," I said carefully. "What made you think about that?" "You seem like a family," Beth said with her characteristic directness. "And families usually live in the same house." "Some families live in different houses," Diana said gently. "There are lots of ways to be a family." "But wouldn't it be easier if we all lived together?" Matilda asked, out of the mouths of babes again. The three girls had figured out what Diana and I were still dancing around, that we'd already become a family in all the ways that mattered. Maybe someday, I said, looking at Diana for confirmation. These things take time to figure out. But you love each other, right? Janie asked with the blunt curiosity of a 6-year-old. Diana and I looked at each other across the fire. We'd been careful not to use that word in front of the children, not wanting to move too fast or create expectations we weren't ready to meet. But sitting there in the firelight, surrounded by our 3 daughters who'd already accepted us as a unit, it seemed silly to keep pretending. Yes, Diana said softly. We do love each other. And we love all of you, I added, looking at each of the girls in turn. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest and hopeful I'd had in years. We talked about what it would mean to live together, about how to blend our households, about the practical and emotional challenges of creating a new kind of family. It won't always be easy, Diana warned the girls. Blending families takes work and patience from everyone. But we're good at working together, Beth pointed out. We've been practicing. She was right. We had been practicing, and we'd gotten quite good at it. 6 months later, Diana and I were married in a small ceremony at the same campground where we'd met. Beth, Janie, and Matilda served as our wedding party, beaming with pride as they watched their parents make it official. Laura attended the ceremony, which surprised me, but pleased the girls. She seemed genuinely happy for us, though I detected a note of wistfulness in her congratulations. Her relationship with Scott had ended several months earlier, and she was navigating single parenthood with the same challenges Diana and I had faced. You look happy, she told me at the reception. I am, I said simply. Good, you deserve that. It was the most generous thing Laura had said to me in years, and I appreciated her effort to be gracious despite whatever regrets she might have been feeling. As Diana and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, surrounded by our children and friends, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. 2 years earlier, I'd been a man desperately trying to save a marriage that was already over. Now I was starting fresh with someone who chose me every day, building a blended family that felt more authentic and joyful than anything I'd experienced before. The girls adapted to our merged household with remarkable ease, as if they'd been waiting for us adults to catch up with what they'd already figured out. We had our challenges, scheduling conflicts, different parenting styles, the occasional clash of personalities, but we worked through them together as a team. Looking back, I can see that Laura's affair was actually a gift, though it certainly didn't feel that way at the time. It forced me to confront the reality that our marriage had been built on incompatible expectations and sustained by my willingness to accept less than I deserved. Her betrayal freed me to discover what love could look like when both people were fully committed to making it work. Diana and I celebrated our 2nd wedding anniversary last month, back at our special campground with all 3 girls. As I watched them roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories around the fire, I felt nothing but gratitude for the winding path that had brought us all together. Sometimes the life you build from the ashes of your old life turns out to be better than anything you'd originally planned.